Turning to business news now, and for that we're joined by business editor Stephen Carroll. We want to start, Stephen, in France. The latest COVID-19 restrictions announced by President Macron on Wednesday, this 9 p.m. curfew going to be bad for certain businesses in particular, like restaurants. Are they going to get more help from the government?
Yes, says Emmanuel Macron. In that interview on French television, the president said the government would have additional aid for sectors that were hurt by the curfew. He particularly mentioned measures which would stop small and medium businesses from going bust. Now, all of that is going to be on top of the existing government aid for affected sectors, particularly those that had been worst hit by the crisis. There's extra help already in place for them, things like hospitality, restaurants, tourism, those sort of sectors. They can already avail of the government's furlough scheme, for example, which covers 100% of employers' wage costs and up to 84% of an employee's net salary. If they're on the minimum wage, they get 100%, but up to 4.5 times the minimum wage, it's about €7,000 a month. You can get up to 84% of your net salary paid by the government. On top of that, companies can apply for grants from the Solidarity Fund. Now, those depend on how much of earnings the business has lost. If they've lost more than 80% of earnings, they can get up to €10,000 a month to cover their outgoings. If they've lost more than 50% of earnings, they can get up to €1,500 a month of earnings. Add to that the state-backed loans available to companies as well, and the more help to come that President Macron hinted at.
So that's for businesses, but what about the individual?
Well, the president acknowledged in the interview that particularly it's young workers and those that are on precarious contracts that have been worst hit economically in this crisis. So he announced a top-up to the basic minimum welfare payment in France. It's called RSA. It's going to be €150 extra to cover this initial six-week period of a curfew, with €100 extra per dependent child as well. This is people who are on the very lowest levels of social welfare support here in France. This, as we've been hearing from campaign groups, that the number of people in poverty in this country is increased by 1 million in 2020.
Wow, that's quite a substantial figure there. Let's move on though, Stephen, and turn to South Korea now. The stock market launch of the record label backed by K-pop stars BTS.
Shares in Big Hit Entertainment have more than doubled on their first day's trading in South Korea. Demand for these shares was huge, driven by the K-pop band's fan base. Investors seemingly unconcerned about the looming military service for the band members. Cami Nedlek reports.
Korean pop juggernaut BTS can even make an IPO go viral. As fans rush to buy shares of the band's record label, now the latest must-have collector's item. Demand for shares was more than 600 times higher than availability, so many buyers were only able to get a fraction of the number they wanted. And within just the first day of trading, investors have already seen strong returns.
오히려 IPO 가격이 가장 싼 가격이 될 것 같고, 향후에 이제 상장이 되고 나면은 그 가격대를 다시 보기가 좀 쉽지가 않을 것 같다, 이렇게 생각하고 있습니다.
The launch makes the CEO an instant billionaire, and each of the band members, who were given almost 70,000 shares ahead of the listing, multi-millionaires. Almost all of the label's revenue comes from BTS, but the coronavirus pandemic means that live concerts, a key revenue generator, are cancelled. Big Hit adapted with virtual pay-per-view concerts like this one, and also sells merchandise and content directly to fans.
세계 최고 수준의 음악과 아티스트를 기획할 수 있는 제작 역량을 갖췄을 뿐 아니라 전 세계에서 팬덤 비즈니스를 가장 잘 이해하는 기업으로서 이를 사업 부가가치로 가장 잘 전환시킬 수 있는 역량을 보유하고 있습니다.
Another risk on the horizon. The band members are approaching the age of compulsory military service, so the label is looking to expand into licensing content, which wouldn't need the artist's direct involvement.
So a very good first day for Big Hit on the markets in South Korea, actually going against the trend on the stock markets across Asia. The Kospi in Seoul down 0.8% at the end of trading there. That's the picture on the Asian markets. Falls across the board. This is investors are pessimistic about the prospects of a stimulus plan being agreed in the United States. The same sentiment carrying over into trading in Europe today as well. Sharp falls across the European markets at the open of trading. Investors also trying to digest the impact of those new COVID-19 restrictions that have been announced in several European countries. The French hotel giant Accor, their shares starting the day down 5% after the news of the curfew announcement here in France.
I hadn't even thought about hotels, I have to say, Stephen. Yeah, the implications will be wide. Finally, from you for this hour, executives at Starbucks are going to have their bonuses linked to increasing diversity at the company.
So the coffee chain is setting targets of at least 30% of its US corporate staff and 40% of its retail employees to be people of colour by 2025. That would boost representation in 9 of the 14 job levels concerned at the company. Starbucks management will have mandatory anti-bias training, and their pay will be linked to meeting those targets for representation. This, as the Trump administration has been discouraging companies that have federal contracts like Starbucks from issuing diversity-related targets.
Interesting. Stephen Carroll with our business news. Thanks a lot for that.